by far the most Zoom attendance I have had since I started working from home in March when we initially went to work from home at the university. As Mary said, I am the one of three prevention specialists for West Virginia University. I cover main campus, West Virginia Tech, and Potomac State. And my main job is to just be a social activist with the students to teach them about bystander intervention, but also to educate the community as well about issues surrounding social justice, including sexual assault and domestic violence, because those are very much those social justice issues. So today in my presentation, The Color of Social Justice, we're going to go through what social justice is and what it is not, but also I'm going to teach you 6 steps to nonviolent progressive social change. It's not enough to talk to you about social justice. As social workers, I have to leave you with a challenge or with a charge, because we are the ones who are out here, boots on the ground, changing the world, one person, one family, one community at a time. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll pause throughout the presentation so we can have a little bit of discussion. I know we're social workers and we go rogue, but I'm going to try to keep us on time so Mary doesn't boot us out of the Zoom session. And with that, let me share my screen. All right, Mary, can you still see my screen? Okay, perfect. All right, so as I said before, the name of the presentation is The Color of Social Justice. So a couple of housekeeping things. The objective is to learn what is social justice for you all and to increase accountability among each participant to ensure social justice is brought to the forefront. And then your learning outcomes, of course, are listed to reflect upon the impact of identity, power, and privilege of the academy and in-service work, and identify campus community resources to aid those experiencing social justice and oppressions. So this is a poem I use with all of my peer advocate students. The peer advocates are about 120 students that attend here at West Virginia University. They take courses with me each semester about social advocacy, justice, social welfare, things like that. And we really do delve into this poem and asking what social justice is, like what language does it speak, as the poem says, how many cars does it have, is it Republican or is it Democrat, is it cross-legged or chanted, is it male or female? And so really through this, we learned that social justice really it's a prism of colors. It's not just one particular color. It's not black, it's not white, it's not just shades of gray. And so again, this is just provided just to kind of get your wheels spinning and thinking. So as we go into key terminology, of course, Margaret Mead is one of my favorite people. And I love the quote, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And that so rings true even with our society the way it is today. So essentially, oppression is what is equal to power plus oppression or control and dominance. And so when we're looking at social justice and the things that stand against social justice, the number one thing is always some form of oppression. Oppression with that power combined together is what leads to social injustices. So these are things that really happen between what we call the dominant in my field and the subordinate group, especially in Title IX. So for example, the dominant may be male fraternal groups versus the female victims of sexual assault on campus. And so what happens when the two agents come together and you have this historical group of one group has power, one group doesn't have power. Also, when the subordinate group or the target of the oppression has always been the less powerful of the group, and their norms and standards are typically criticized by the other. All right, so when we're looking at the different prisms of social justice and social injustices, there are 4 levels to what we would call racism, or the things that we teach here at the university. So of course, there's the personal level that plays into it, our private beliefs, our prejudices, our ideas that individuals have. Then there's the interpersonal part, and that's the expression of racism between individuals. And then of course, our institutional, which is, discriminatory, like policies, things that keep people oppressed, things that keep people from climbing up the social structure. And then there's the structural or the systemic thing, public policies and things put into place. And so real quick, in thinking about that, what are some ways in which maybe the field you're in, you see social injustices happening with this frame model, whether it's personal, interpersonal, institutional, or structural? So essentially, what is social justice? Social justice is an ideal condition in which all members of society have the same basic rights, protection, opportunities, obligations, and social benefits. And I just love this definition, one, because it comes from the social work dictionary, because, you know, we know how to define things best as social workers, I always believe, but it really does provide sort of a base model or a framework for how moving forward when we're advocating for our clients or ourselves or communities, whoever your client is. For me, my client is all 34,000 students at West Virginia University, plus the other students at all the other campuses and faculty staff. So I have like a large community and client base that I serve. But this is the frame-based work model for me as a practitioner when I'm doing this equity work on behalf of West Virginia University. So some key concepts of social justice, there has to be an equitable distribution of resources. And so we're not just talking about, a lot of people are like, oh, well, it's equal. Well, equal is, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the picture of the three people watching the baseball game, and one is the taller person is on the box, but the shortest person is on the smaller box, and the medium height person is on a box as well. Well, equity is when we just completely tear the fence down and there's no fence for anybody to look over, so we don't need those boxes. So we want to have an equitable distribution of resources. So even in the fields that we're working in, or you all are working in, you want to make sure that it's equitable, because you can give equal resources to a person, but are the resources equitable? Is there equitable access to those? Also, self-determining and independent society. So again, you know, as social workers, we believe in a client's right to self-determination. That is one of our core key principles or core key ethics. So we want to make sure that the social justice is self-determining and interdependent in society. We don't want to tell people what type of social justice they're seeking. The third thing is actors who understand themselves, their agencies, and their responsibilities to others in society. So you not only have to understand yourself, but you have to understand the agency in what you're representing or you're working for, but also have that, know that responsibility to others in society as well. So now we're going to learn about the 6 steps of nonviolent social change. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen in the news, but a very influential group of students at the beginning of the summer here at West Virginia University sent a petition and a letter to President Gee's office, and they tagged all of their congressional representatives for our area. They tagged all of their state, Senate, and delegate representatives as well, including local municipalities as well. And so what's interesting is all of those students at one point or another were a part of my peer advocate group and a part of the class Social Action and Change for Justice that I teach here at the institution. And so with these 6 steps of nonviolent progressive social change, they were developed by Dr. Martin Luther King. And it's really a way as us as social workers, we could utilize these skills once we learn these 6 steps to utilize them to be able to push forward those social changes we're looking to see, whether it's on an individual, a macro, micro, or meso level. And so again, I love quotes. This one by Dr. King is one of my favorites. History will have to record the greatest tragedy of this period. The social transition was not the strident clamor of the bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. And so I always teach my students that activism takes many forms. And it's not just doing the work. Sometimes when you choose not to do the work or not to say anything and not to stand up and say something, you're still choosing the side of activism. Just so you know, these steps do not have to be used in order. You don't even have to use all 6 when trying to push for social justice or social change. Sometimes you only have to use one, or you can use them out of order or interchangeably. So step 1 is information gathering. One of the things when you're pushing for social justice and social change, you have to be educated and you have to gather your information. And so in order to be able to articulate the issue, if it's like for those of you in the room who are youth service workers, in order to understand and be able to articulate the problem that the person or community institution is facing, you have to understand it. You have to know what you're talking about. You have to know the issue. There's nothing worse than an advocate going in unprepared and not having enough information or not have gathered any information of your own. When I was practicing in the field outside of higher education, I always said that I never trusted anyone's information but my own. So I would always go and research that client or that community or that institution that I was working with for myself. And then for supplemental material, I would use what was already provided or what was there before me. You must investigate and gather all vital information from all sides of the argument or issue. So that increases your understanding and your level and ability to be able to push for that first block of social justice or social change. essentially you must become an expert on your opponent's position. If you can learn your opponent's position, if you can learn and become an expert on that, there's no real argument you won't be able to be able to stand toe to toe with that opponent. Any questions or comments for this slide? Okay. So for step two is education. It is essential to inform others, including your opposition, about your issue. So you, again, once you gather your information, you need to be able to educate people on the policy or educate people on the client that you're advocating for. This minimizes misunderstandings and gains you support and sympathy when pushing for social justice and social change, or even policy change or anything like that. So step three is personal commitment. So essentially here you have to daily check and affirm your faith in the philosophy and methods of nonviolence. A lot of times, people, believe things should be taken by force, and that is where we get into kind of gray and dangerous areas when we're pushing for social justice or any type of social change at all. It's always positive and smart to eliminate the hidden motives and prepare yourself to accept suffering if necessary, if you work for justice. And suffering can come in the form of, you had a really bad day in court, things didn't turn out for your clients the way you thought they should have, or you've been working really, really, really hard in this community to get people up on their feet and help them kind of get the resources and things that they need, and it just didn't come through for you. And so never forget your personal commitment to it, because if you're personally committed to the causes and things that we undertake as practitioners, and then it takes more and more of a deep meaning for you. Step four is discussion and negotiation. Step four is actually my favorite step. This is, you really do have to use grace and humor and intelligence to confront the other party with the list of injustices and plan for addressing and resolving these injustices. So there's nothing worse than advocating for some type of social justice or social change or policy change, and you come with just a laundry list of issues and complaints, but you don't come with any resources, you don't come with any thoughts or ideals about how to change or any solutions. And so even with my students who presented the petition to the institution, they did a really thorough, really good job. And then when President Gee gave them the 6 committees that he created in order to address the issues of our Black and brown students, they were like, Ms. Akeya, they were just still complaining. And so at this point, I had to teach them what we call discussion and negotiation with West Virginia University itself. And whether that be, and if they're in the room with President Gee, or the janitor or a faculty member, or even the members that sit on our board of governors, you must be able to provide that list. Never want to give the opposition an opportunity to define your issue for you. That is the worst thing that you could ever do when pushing for social justice or change, because if they don't understand or support the act of social justice or change you're trying to implement in the first place, then definitely giving them the power during discussion and negotiation to define that for you will leave you what we call dead in the water. Any questions or comments on this one? All right, and so one of the last points for this slide is do not seek to humiliate your opponent, but to call forth the good in the opponent. So again, every side has some good parts to their argument. Our job here is not to obliterate or to humiliate anyone. So step 5 is direct action. So these are actions taken when the opponent is unwilling to enter into or remain in discussion or negotiation. So this is what happens when you use the discussion and negotiation and it breaks down. These actions impose a creative tension into conflicts, applying moral pressure on your opponent to work with you in resolving the injustice. Prime example, again, I'll use my students who are currently working with the university administration on bettering relations for Black and brown students here at WVU. Really calling upon what they did was, what they were missing in the beginning was West Virginia University is the flagship institution for the state, but we're also a land grant institution. And with that land grant status comes a very imperative, important mission to provide equitable resources and to be equitable in nature and an example for the rest of our state and for the globalized world and communities we work with. And so taking that land grant mission, what I had the students do was write out the mission statement of the university and what the land grant, what being land grant means. And then I had them take the issues that the Black and brown students are having, and they've been having for years with this institution, and saying, are these things that you're providing, are these resources really equitable? Are you really, yes, you're equal, yes, you're inclusive, but are you being equitable? And so those are one of the things that's really a great thing that you can do for, again, if you are working for an institution, if you're representing individual clients, or if you're representing the community, list it out for the person and then play on applying that pressure to resolve the injustice. Any questions or comments? So step 6 is reconciliation. So nonviolence seeks friendships and understanding with the opponent. Nonviolence does not seek to defeat the opponent. Nonviolence is directed against evil systems, forces, and oppressive policies, unjust acts, not just against people. So when we're pushing for social justice and social change, it's not about individual people. Individual people are going to come in and they're going to come out. People are going to change, positions are going to change, and things like that. Elections and things are going to happen. So we never really focus on individuals in general. We focus on the systemic oppressive things that empower set individuals to be oppressive in nature. Through reason compromise, both sides resolve the injustice with a plan of action. Each act of reconciliation is one step closer to the beloved community or policy that you're pushing for. Any questions? Next, last part of our presentation today, I'm going to talk to you about becoming a non-performative ally. And I can tell you, performative allyship is very deadly. Activism cannot begin and it cannot end with hashtags, okay? So hashtag Black Lives Matter, hashtag, Women's Lives Matter, hashtag consent is key. All these hashtags, social media world we're using. Performative allyship is just as dangerous as racism. Because really, are you doing it to really push social progressive change? Are you really doing it to get the heat off of you and make you seem like a caring and engaging individual? So what performative allyship is before we understand what performative is, real allyship. So an ally is someone from a non-marginalized group who uses their privilege to advocate for a marginalized group. They transfer the benefits of their privilege to those who lack it. So again, using your voice, your power, your influence to then push those progressive social changes we're looking for. Performative allies, on the other hand, is when someone from that non-marginalized group professes to support in solidarity with a marginalized group in a way that either isn't helpful or that actively harms that group. And so this is also what's known in my field is inactive bystandership. So either you're going to be an ally and be a great upstander or bystander, and you're going to do and you're going to say and you're going to use your power and influence to help others get equitable treatment, or you're going to be a performative. You're going to be a non-active, non-acting bystander. Again, like I said before, activism takes many forms. And so either way, you're going to choose what kind of activist or ally you're going to be. Performative allyship normally involves in the ally receiving some kind of reward on social media. Is that virtual pat on the back for being a good person or on the right side. And so they're really never doing it with the intention of seeing it through. They're never really wanting to see the outcome of the social injustice going away. They're really only there when it's lights, camera, action, but as soon as the news people pull off, as soon as everything dies down, you don't hear anything about their work against the social injustice. And those are people I like to say are, when no one is watching, when no one is around me, no one knows who I am, I'm still the same Akeya, I'm still the same advocate. Even with the students I work with, I have done no press interviews and I've been offered. I've not spoke out any about it because again, I tell them it's about them, it's not about me. I'm here voluntarily at this institution. I could pack up my talents and go anywhere in the country I want to go to work. But I choose to stay here and do this work. And that's the same for us in our work as practitioners. We can choose, we're here voluntarily, we're working within these systems, but our clients didn't choose this. They have to stay in it in order to get the equitable resources that they need. And so it should always be about them. And one thing performative allies always do is put themselves in the forefront instead of being in the background, being a supportive role for those being oppressed. Any questions? So just some key steps in becoming an ally. In order to become a really good change agent or an ally, it's important to really take 4 basic steps in becoming a great ally. So the first basic step is awareness. Know who I am and how I am different. If you know you and how it affects you, and you know you and you recognize the privileges that you have, then you know how you're different from the group you're advocating for. If you don't know yourself first, sometimes yourself can get in the way of real allyship and real social justice work, because then the personal things and our own values, our own beliefs kind of interrupt there. The second one is knowledge and education. So learn about groups, history, culture, norms, experiences, contributions. How do laws, policies, stereotypes impact individuals of the group as a whole? Again, before people, you know, I had to kind of get off social media for a while before I lost my job, because some of the things that people are saying and doing, especially, you know, with our students. I'm very, very, very protective of the students I work with. I always tell people, try to be informed, not just opinionated. There's a difference between being opinionated on an issue, but being informed. Did you study it out? Have you even looked at it? And we're not talking about the watered down history that our education system teaches us, because they only teach one side of history. We're talking about, have you talked to a Black person? Have you talked to a Hispanic immigrant and learned their struggle? Have you gone into the homes of these youth or into the communities to see why this keeps being such a perpetuated issue? Where is the cycle? It's almost like that saying where, you know, the social worker was pulling everyone out of the water and then got tired when they could have just walked to the top of the hill and seen why people kept jumping into the water. That's what we need to be doing. That's knowledge and education. Where is the why? Why is this happening? How? Like, I'm like studying the higher education system. I wanted to know how I could be a better advocate and how I can be better at my job. So I enrolled in the PhD program, and I'm in the history of higher education right now. I greatly see why it's so unequitable. It was never made for anyone but privileged, white, heterosexual, cisgender males. It wasn't meant for anyone else. So of course, years of this is building in the fabric of the systemic oppression is going to be hard to dismantle. You know, it's going to be challenging. The policies are going to be challenging. The third one is skills. Develop skills in communicating what you have learned. Again, we don't want you going for the press conference or going into the community unprepared. So learn good communication skills. Who do you go and talk to in the community that you're advocating for? Who is the person that everyone looks to? Even if you're dealing with people from other cultures, how do you communicate with those within that culture? In the student groups, I know which students are key and integral among the Black and brown students. And so pay respect to those students first, because that's how you get things done. You learn to communicate. And then when you're communicating what you have learned, again, making sure you're not being offensive in nature as an ally, making sure what you have learned is actual base knowledge you got from the group, the first hand from the group, not secondhand information. The fourth one is action. Speaking, acting out against injustice can be most frightening if you choose not to act. Pay attention to the impact of your inactivity as on you as it has a target group. So again, pay attention to how it acts against you as well. Because if you neglect yourself, then you're kind of sabotaging the mission at hand. Because you have to make sure you're okay. You have to make sure that you're understanding, you're learning. Pay attention to when inactivity is happening with whatever issue or cause you're uptaking. What impact has it had on that target group? So what impact have certain policies had maybe on Hispanic immigrants? What impact have policies had, certain rules and regulations and policies have had on people who maybe live in government housing or housing projects, or even on our youth? So when all this inactivity that's happened and now everybody wants to help the youth, what impact has it had on this target group in our state for all of these years, especially our foster care youth? What impact has all this inactivity had on them? And how are we going to help them and their families or their potential new families moving forward? Any questions? I can see the chat lighting up. I just can't. No. Okay, so I have here on the screen my email. If you ever need a resource or information or a presentation, myself or one of my graduate assistants or some of my senior level students will be more than happy to provide provide that for you. Also, if you wouldn't mind following my peer advocates on Facebook and Instagram. So this is where I post all of the community projects that they're a part of, because everything that I'm involved in, they're involved in because it's a part of the class that I instruct. October is coming up, so it's going to be Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So we're doing some really awesome virtual programs and providing some really great virtual seminars as well on how to be an ally for those who are suffering from domestic violence or victims of domestic or intimate partner violence. So that's their social media information, and I pretty much run their social media, and then they just come up with the projects, and then we stomp out this work together here at WVU. But so yes, there is my email and the information. Any other questions or comments or anything?